Hey Marvel fans, welcome back to the channel. I'm your host Name and this is The Nerdy Lair. And we have to talk about Disney Plus and why a lot of Marvel fans are underwhelmed with the Marvel Disney Plus shows thus far in Phase 4. And they feel like they're not getting either what was promised to them or what they were expecting when this was announced almost 3 years ago. So in this video, I want to go over the good and the bad of the Marvel Disney Plus shows and talk about the future of Marvel on Disney Plus and the importance it will have on the MCU. Starting off, I want to talk about the good of the Disney Plus shows, and then I'm going to transition into more of my worries and concerns and the things I don't like. So number one, for the pros, I think that you get a very deep character study and character development for a lot of these characters, and I think that you can really flesh them out in these shows since you don't have to focus on like all the MCU connectivity and all that fun stuff. You can really just focus on the characters and like the main characters specifically, and you can get them real fleshed out and bring them to a point where they're a totally different character, like we saw in Loki and even WandaVision. And pro number two, which kind of ties into pro number one, is you get a lot of unknown heroes that wouldn't get shine in other movies, get shine in these Disney Plus shows. And that's really fun. And you can build a fan base for these characters off their Disney Plus shows and then put them in movies. Like a Moon Knight, hopefully, we get him in Midnight Suns and now he has a more broader fan base than just his small comic book fan base that he had before the show. And pro number three, we're just getting way more content. Like at some point, we're going to be probably getting like 2 shows at the same time. Like just look at how many shows they have in development. A lot of them are going to be ready. I don't think they're going to hold back on them just because of scheduling. I think they're just going to release like 2 shows at one time, like, and just do it like that. Like I can see a point where like animation and live action, you have like 10 shows a year, like something crazy like that. And it's just wild. I never thought there'd be this much content in the MCU, and I'm all here for it. It's probably the best part of these Disney Plus shows. And this also ties into my last pro, which is you can flesh out the MCU with all this content in this time in the MCU. You can really flesh it out, show us different corners of the MCU, different parts of the MCU that we never thought we would see, and stuff like that, like the TVA and stuff like that. It was really cool, and I think that's fun stuff you can do with these Disney Plus shows. You can introduce small things that may be not crazy for a movie, it would be really cool to find in like episode 3 of a TV show. And overall, I think the Disney Plus shows have been a huge benefit, especially to like your casual MCU fan and especially to your hardcore MCU fan. Like myself, someone who just really enjoys MCU content. But I'd be lying if I said there weren't problems and there weren't concerns for the Disney Plus shows. And I think the biggest one, or one of the biggest ones, is the lack of connectivity with these shows and cohesion. I don't feel like they're a part of the main MCU storyline. I feel like they're like offshoot filler stories that don't really matter. They're not really important to the story. And honestly, I just feel like these shows are setups for the movies. So like when you see the character, they're not like a brand new character because you have some familiarity with them. But most of the Disney Plus shows just feel largely unnecessary to watch. So I think that needs to definitely be corrected. I think they need to add more MCU goodness and connectivity and cohesion and just better storytelling in general for these shows. But kind of tying into my last point, I think there's just a big drop off from the quality of the movies, especially movies like Multiverse of Madness and No Way Home, to the shows. Like Loki is the only show that really stands toe to toe to like some of the best MCU movies. But all the other shows are pretty lackluster when you compare them to most MCU movies. They're just not on the same level. And I don't think this is purposeful. If it is, it'd be really dumb. But I don't think they're trying to make the movies better on purpose than the shows to like make sure people go see the movies. I don't think there's some malicious thing going on. But I do think when you don't have that much of an MCU connection or that connective tissue, and you also like cut a lot of cool nerdy stuff out your content that gets fans excited, that like the MCU kind of was built on, like not having gore in Moon Knight or something like that, will hurt the shows and will hurt the vibe of the show. And also it will just hurt eyeballs watching the show. Like they won't be as big and people won't care as much as they do for the movies. And I imagine a lot of casuals are skipping the shows and just watching movies because you don't really need to watch the shows. They're just extra. So I think these problems definitely need to be corrected. And I think the MCU really needs to look at themselves. And I think they already are. I think Kevin Feige, with this 10-year plan that we've heard a lot about, is sitting down with people and saying like these shows need to do better, and I think they will, especially after Phase 4. But right now they're in a rough spot. They're not doing too hot. I mean, they're good TV shows, but they're not that MCU goodness that we're used to, even compared to the Phase 4 movies. But while I have all these issues with the MCU shows, I still think that the Disney Plus shows in the future could be way more epic and have way more connective tissue that feel a lot more important to the MCU. and that the reason these phase 4 shows have been more like filler and less crazy and just more lackluster than we imagined could be because of things like the pandemic, like Endgame, like the Sony Spider-Man fallout. And that could have led Marvel just decide to take it easy and chill, but also put out a bunch of content and still have a bunch of big teases and Easter eggs that are showing us what is coming ahead. So then after phase 4, we can get into the normal Marvel formula that we know and love. And we do know that Kevin Feige announced that they were taking a retreat. This was a while ago during the Doctor Strange premiere. And they're going to be planning out the next 10 years of the MCU. So very soon we'll have things like all of the Netflix characters, the Fantastic Four and Doctor Doom, as well as the mutants and the X-Men. So I think there's a big chance that once we get all this stuff introduced and out the way, all the content in the shows will be the normal Marvel magic we've all grown accustomed to, and it will have all that connectivity and nerdy comic book sweatiness that we've all been dying for. Now, the worst case scenario, in my opinion, is that Marvel specifically wants the shows to be lower in quality than the movies, and they might keep the shows at the same filler type level, but then raise the level for the movies. Now, I don't think this will happen, but I can see a world where it does. And I think it would just be really stupid and a big missed opportunity. But I think Kevin Feige knows this. And I do think eventually we will get more dope shows that feel important to the MCU, like Loki Season 1. But until then, I am a little worried about these MCU shows and how they will be executed. And I do think that the MCU shows need to be better. But for right now, I'm just content and just excited to see the future of Disney Plus and all the possibilities it brings. If you agree or disagree, leave opinions down below. Peace out.